I'm Liz Gunn with this Thursday New Zealand Loyal policy statement, and tonight's one is called Re-educating the Educated. Education is said to be, a vital component in the development of any nation, and I wholeheartedly agree with the principle behind that statement. However, of course, it is the type of education currently being employed in New Zealand and the type of information being disseminated through our schools and university that is causing me and many parents and many Kiwis, especially employers, grave concern. So what do we know? Well, for one, we know the world is in one hell of a mess financially, and despite the educated experts being in control, no one has the first clue how to fix it. And secondly, you're all being conned and told one thing, while the realities are, as many of us are working out now, by far a very different story. So today's policy announcement will deal with the very subject that underlines all others: education. Education is a foundation stone of our society, and it needs to be looked at if we are going to have a much healthier New Zealand society. I'll attempt to demonstrate the current situation and what needs to be addressed to bring a balance to it all. And I'm not saying that all currently educated experts have it wrong. No, not at all. What I am saying is many of them, although they hold degrees in various subjects, really do not seem to show the rest of us that they have any idea about the real world applications of that knowledge. And perhaps they don't even fully understand the need for the healing and the use of their knowledge in very different ways from the way it's currently being applied. As we all know, there's a vast difference between learning from a book and learning through hands-on experience. And the following thoughts that I will share with you on the subject of education, I believe to be valid, but as always at New Zealand Loyal, we are open for your ideas, Kiwi ideas. We are open for debate and challenge. That is what we will bring to this country once we get into government. We are a party that will listen to you, the people of New Zealand, and your views on education will be key. So let's look at our education policy. Well, it's very unfortunate that New Zealand has fallen into the same trap as many Western countries that have continuously applied a one-size-fits-all type of education system. Anyone with common sense knows that one size does not fit all when it comes to educating human beings. The one-size-fits-all education policy is, frankly, a disaster, and it does nothing to boost the confidence of those who are not academically minded. Quite the contrary, really. It harms many of our children, and it harms far more than it helps. Some people will just never be suited to an academic pursuit of learning, and therefore when they're at school they never achieve high grades. They will have a perception, and some may be told, that they have failed, or, as has happened here in New Zealand, even worse, educational standards will be lowered across the board to accommodate them. And this dishonest lowering of educational standards does not serve the non-academically minded student. In fact, it morally corrupts the tertiary educational system that receives the student and is told to get them through, no matter what. The only group this tactic seems to benefit are the highly paid denizens of the various overgrown, bloated university bureaucracies who get richer with each yearly increase in the numbers of bums on seats, to use the colloquial term. And that is what university insiders call it. This obviously constitutes a highly incorrect, a wrong, a morally corrupted approach to education. In their hearts, I would suggest those academic insiders know that. But of course, the lure of money has its power with many people who are willing to turn away from their own moral codes. Every man, woman, and child has a specific ability or a natural learning that should, at the earliest possible moment, be identified and nurtured. And as I said before, not everyone is academically inclined. This is not a pejorative statement. It's not putting anybody down. Back in saner times, Western societies regarded the academically inclined as gifted, but somewhat restricted in their range of talents. Yes, they went on to university, but not because they were the best of society, but because it was really the only place they could give expression to their often rather narrow gift, which might be best described as a talent for more abstract forms of thinking and communication via often formal written protocols. Far from being put on pedestals as sort of omniscient experts and then empowered to dictate state policies to the wider public, the professor class was regarded by former healthy Western societies of years gone by as quasi-narrow in their application, useful but narrow. And there were some archaic expressions, the egghead professor, not again as a put-down, but to connote a very narrow view of how the society worked in the wider, more practical societal functions. Of course, in contrast, in saner times, the great majority of people in Western societies declined to go to university precisely because they had within them a much broader range of talent and therefore the capacity to contribute to society in a wide variety of ways, not just in one or two. They would, in those times, get a baseline formal education in the public school system up to sometimes year 9, sometimes year 12 or 13, enough though to equip them to go out into the world and develop the specific talents that most spoke to their souls, as well as to continue learning their entire lives long in the mode and from the sources they considered the most valuable and dependent. Believe it or not, there was a time when people learned history and science on their own. They were autodidacts, they were self-learners. And this old way of approaching education, so infused with, well, common sense and infused with wisdom and practicality, this worked. For example, how many people, despite not having any formal education or the ability to even read plans, could build great structures that still remain standing and solid, no matter what the climate throws at them, those structures today? How many could identify a problem with crop failure and, despite never having attended a horticultural school, know exactly how to remedy the problem and have a good harvest the following year? How many people have healed the sick and brought relief to the ailing, and yet those people have never attended medical school? I mean, these are just a few of many examples that many of you will identify with. You might now be wondering how the system changed from that sane one of old to the sort of freakish one of today, one which features a grotesquely university top-heavy society, which is marred by a relentless devaluation in the value of academic degrees. And by the way, the term degree factory, or degree mill, we'll call it, is one that many academics are very familiar with, but few call out publicly. This may be because of the dirty little secret in academia, which is that academic promotion often depends on the number of masters and doctoral students an academic institution successfully pushes through the system. But back to the reason for the deleterious change I was discussing. It's simple. Over the course of the last 30 years, our economy has been treasonously and mercilessly de-industrialized and outsourced. We don't produce the things we used to produce in this country. We all know about sending the production off to China. As that has occurred, the off-ramps into the real world out of high school have become fewer and fewer for our students, for our young people. Year 13s have for years now been told that the only viable option for them after high school is to go on to university. Of course, what isn't openly stated is that university has become the #1 option by default, as other options have been eliminated through the elimination of much of our economy. Going to university is not what many Year 13s need or even want, but promoted by their so-called counsellors at school, they go in droves. And their continued enrolment keeps the sham alive and the money flowing into the coffers of the university class and the government aid bureaucrats and the grant bestowers down in Wellington. And so it has continued and built unabated. New Zealand Oil will seek to end this morally bankrupt education system. We shall do so by first and foremost reinvigorating our economy and restoring it to full spectrum balance so that the off-ramps for students at the end of high school are many and they're varied. If you would like to know more about that, you can listen to my prior address on the economy for further details about this growth of our New Zealand economy. Once we get the new New Zealand economy off the ground, the only education that will be needed to be delivered by the state schools to the people will be a basic foundation on which to build the future learning in the modern world. We believe it should consist of the following. #1, the ability to read, write, and effectively communicate. Secondly, the ability to spell correctly and to comprehend the language. Thirdly, the ability to add, to subtract, to divide, and to multiply. Really, little other learning is required to be delivered by the state in the early developmental stages. It's after gaining the foundations above that the student can then enter any field of higher learning that they so choose. And by the way, we do not believe in homework. Children should go home and play and learn to plant seeds and go out in nature and build and be in their imaginations. A person who's great with their hands may opt to enter vocational training and become a mechanic through hands-on practical application, with the apprenticeship schemes being a great vehicle for this. Another person may choose the sciences and therefore learn, as part of that training, all relevant information pertaining to their chosen field, and so on. One thing is clear though, when people are doing the study that they love, out of passion and interest, rather than the study they're told they need to do to survive, well, then we will see far greater productivity, far greater happiness, and far fewer absences, because being happy in one's study and later work ensures the very best standard and a far greater willingness to put effort in. So we suggest adopting the following. Make immediate and focused changes to the education system to ensure all students are equipped with the basic foundations of learning that will see them excel in the future. Don't waste time and effort on trying to brainwash them into a mould using universally applied curriculums that don't even suit the nation's future needs. Build several vocational training facilities, 1 or more per province, to allow easy access to a variety of practical, common sense training programs. This will ensure well-trained local tradespeople who can then, in turn, provide the expertise required in the development of this nation, instead of having to constantly recruit and look elsewhere. Ensure both academic and practical training programs are equally valued and accessible to all willing participants through professionally administrated facilities. This will ensure all skills and academic abilities are recognised and utilised for the good of New Zealand, instead of isolating those who do not measure up to what is really a failure by the education system to harness the most important and natural elements of all human traits, to harness the creativity of human beings in all the different areas in which we can flourish. And then we need to identify and nurture the natural learning of students to best equip them for future higher learning or for trade placements. There can be no failures when one contributes to the good of the nation, and as we all know, some of the greatest discoveries and breakthroughs have been achieved by the so-called uneducated, meaning the brilliant, self-taught who have never gone to any kind of university. In fact, real change and advancement are driven by the autodidact, the self-learning class, not the promotion-craving professoriate. They are those that dare to challenge the status quo. They are those who dare to think outside the box, those real creatives. We offer all these suggestions in the context of understanding the broader dynamic at play here. It's crucial, it's really important to bear in mind that the fate of our education system is inexorably bound up with the fate of our economy and the fate of our country. And that's because any given educational system is the natural handmaiden to any given economy. The kneecapping of our economy over many decades has led to the terrible warping and constriction of our educational system that we see today. The reverse can and will happen. As the economy is restored back to health, the educational system will reacquire its health. This will take time, and it must and will largely be an organic process. We will work on it together as we work on everything else, with our open communication, with the views of you, the people of New Zealand. New Zealand Loyal is your party, and we will be your government. We offer these suggestions not as panaceas in their own right, but as markers and signposts for the direction we hope to take the country in, once you place us in the position to do so, a New Zealand Loyal government. We shall not allow our schools to serve as the delivery vehicle for the cabals, the globalists, anti-human agendas of depopulation, and there we include trans and LGBTQ+, for their agenda of destruction of the innocence of childhood, and there we're talking about the sexualization of children via trans indoctrination, and the United Nations ghastly how to masturbate when you're a toddler materials, which seem to be intended as a pathway for the normalization of pedophilia, which the cabal seems hell-bent on normalizing via this supposed new normal term of MAP, which means minor attracted person. That is pedophilia. And thirdly, through the globalists' atheism and even their Satanism. Yes, there are Satan clubs springing up in schools in Western nations. Together, taken together, these deeply uncomfortable topics require their own separate conversation. But suffice to say that in the last 5 to 10 years, the globalists have used elementary and high school, junior and high school here in New Zealand, to push these agendas as covertly and as relentlessly as possible. We will also not put up with the globalists' critical race theory and all its components that deliberately lead to further division and to social disorder. No, once we the people reclaim our power, we will thoroughly uproot all of these agendas from the schools and from the universities, putting all such teachings off limits as a matter of New Zealand law.